So we have a bunch of CWNEs here. They are representing territories. Fernay from Latin America.
There you go.
Alan Blake from the EU. Elaine Dangle?
Daigle. Or
Yeah, okay.
Daigle.
Whatever, Elaine. We'll just keep it on the short one. From North America, but he represents the French part of North America. You know that little. And Blake, someone who's been around for a long time. Oh. And he came to the conference and he didn't talk, so we got to get him out of here. Okay, first question up, and we'll just start, we'll just work our way down. Since you started learning on your path towards CWNE, we've had a lot of changes in Wi-Fi. The question is, what has not changed since you started?
The one thing I would say that has not changed is that you have to have the need and desire to always be learning, because if you stop learning, if you stop spending your own time trying to figure out what's going on, you'll get left behind really fast. And I've noticed that even with some of the things that I've worked on, where I'm not in the statistical controllers every single day anymore, and I kind of get into some of these newer controllers and it's like, what the heck is this? So I think the one thing that has never changed is you have to keep up with this if you want to stay relevant. Otherwise, you'll get way behind in a matter of just a couple of months.
You have a mic?
Yeah. What has not changed? I guess the people always ask you questions, and you have to go back to the basic. And sometimes when I teach Wi-Fi, I always get back to the basic, the first protocol, 802.11b, so on and so forth. So it's just an evolution, but we always have to keep in mind that it's been 20 years, and those old protocols are still there. So it's good to think about it when you teach to others. Because sometimes, as we have learned in this conference, a lot of people think interference is from other source of Wi-Fi, but it is not. It is Wi-Fi that is the worst Wi-Fi interference to Wi-Fi.
I will extend on the Blake's statement, not in the fact that we have to keep learning, but that there is lack of knowledge. I come across that since I started till now, we go to classes and projects and places, and people assume they know what they're doing, and they're just comfortable in that area of working on their controllers and doing their own proprietary stuff. But the lack of knowledge, I think, seems to be constant, and because of the same reason, since it's evolving all the time. By the time we think we learn something, there's 50 new things that we have to be up to speed on. So lack of knowledge would be my answer.
I'm going to say two things, actually. The controversial one is the opinions and the egos haven't changed. I think, and I mean it in a nice way here. And I mean it, and I think what I'm trying to say is it just shows the passion that we have, because everyone kind of wants to do Wi-Fi really, really well, but I do find that it's really, really interesting that there's a lot of people that believe that they are the righteous way of doing things, and to me, since I've been in Wi-Fi since about 2010, it hasn't changed. People are still kind of reminiscing the same thing and still putting out their opinions, but to kind of like say the other thing that hasn't changed for me is the contribution of this community, giving up your free time, giving the research. I mean, chatting to the Untitled boys earlier about blogging and things like this. So the community comes together, and we kind of write out our passion on the screen, and then we print it, tweet it out, and let everybody share. And I think we should continue to do that. And I think that's a really, really wonderful thing, and it hasn't changed since I've really got into Wi-Fi around about 2010. So.
All right, we'll come back, starting with Alan again. CBRS, what are you doing to prepare? Or are you?
Well, nothing at the minute, because CBRS is new. It's more of a US-centric thing in the US, I guess. So we have in the UK, where I am, Ofcom are our kind of regulators for the frequency. So the research and the reading that I've kind of done all I know is that they're going to be doing using potentially different frequency bands. They're going to copy the model of CBRS, I believe. So this shared model that is coming out, I think they're probably going to wait to see what happens over in the States, and then they may actually implement that over here. But for me personally, I'm just going to sit tight and wait and see what happens.
I've been trying to read blogs and attend webinars. Like last night I was in one from Salona. But I think even though some things seem to be similar, there's still a lot of language out there that I have no idea. So I'm going to have to be reading more, and hopefully as it starts evolving and we start getting more involved with it, probably doing some testing as well and just trying to participate, because there's a lot. There's like huge potential to it, but seems like everything is LTE and cellular centric, so we're going to have to start learning things outside of our comfort zone.
I need to understand more about CBRS. I guess the benefit I see is that in a lot of area, especially in complex where you have a lot of resident, there could be a benefit to have, let's say, a cellular radio within the Wi-Fi radio. But then again, as one of the guys explained, it takes a long time to get stuff approved. So we'll have to see how it gets approved, and in reality when we have product and can see a lot more reality about it.
Honestly, I haven't really spent too much time looking at it at all. From my standpoint, what I'm trying to figure out is it an area that I actually want to play in or not, just because of the differentials in terms of what are the tools going to look like? Are we going to have any sort of licensing to actually be able to go through and do any of this? It's just kind of, for me, it's been more figuring out, is this an area that we want to attack, or is this an area that we would just rather still focus on wireless and wireless only?
Just to quickly add as well, there's next year we're going to see possibly a lot of bidding for the actual frequency. So I think next year we'll hopefully see a little bit more come out, because that's when they're being sold.
Yeah, it's scheduled for February to have the first auction in CBRS. But what intrigues me and gets me excited is iPhone 11s have CBRS built in. A bunch of Samsungs have. iPhones in Japan have had CBRS for 2 years. So I was always worried it was going to be a client deficit. As long as it was just one CBRS to another, is a limited amount. But now it's getting closer. So I suggest you start looking on the horizon. Part of the reason is also, as we move towards 6 gig, 6 gig is a substantial change, even though we talked a little bit, it's still in our thing. It's still going to be APs. 3.5 gig is still right in between 2, 4, and 5, and the devices are access points. They don't call them that, but they're just access points connected up with PoE to one of our switches on our networks. So it really fits in our world more than the world of the cellular guys. Okay, next up. What you are all CWNEs, which means you studied for a long time, passed multiple tests. What are you studying now?
What I should be studying now, I should say it as, because it seems that life keeps getting in the way, is for me right now is I've gone down the Cisco certification track, I've gone down the CWNE certification track, and I've always tried to be broad in terms of understanding multiple vendors. So I'm trying to go towards all of the expert level certifications from Aruba, but yeah, that thing called life and kids gets in the way right now.
For me, it's a CSC Advanced. I find that a lot of the time, when I go to to troubleshoot wireless LAN, I always use the EKA Pro tool. Keith mentioned earlier that some other people may use the packet analysis, but I'm more comfortable with that. I start with the Spectrum, and then a lot of the time I find that a lot of people rely on the controller and everything to be automatic, and especially in company where you have a lot of company in the same building, they go with that, and they go with 80 megahertz default. And that creates a lot of problem because there are different companies. So for me, to be able to troubleshoot again with that type of tool, I think it's an asset.
I'm just trying to get more knowledge about AX. This is like such a broad subject right now and hot topic. Many of the presentations in this conference, it's been great, and a lot of AX stuff has come up. And yes, we were talking about AX last year, that maybe yes, maybe not, but it looks like it just hit us before we knew it, and it's here, it's happening. So that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around right now.
I'm going to be completely left field. So again, two things. Sticking with the topic, I've been doing a little bit of Python. So I've read page 1 of a How to Python Easy book, and that's all I've read. But that's but that's where I kind of think the industry kind of maybe we as guys, as Wi-Fi engineers, kind of need to look at as well. Having other skills, because it's probably going to be more prevalent in our industry, with what's coming and everything else. And the other thing I'm also kind of researching and studied up on is, and you may have already know this, but also blockchain technologies, cryptocurrencies, and also financial markets. Really, really interesting stuff. But it's just, I like to read a lot. I like to kind of learn new things, and this is just some of the stuff that I've been doing, because you can always kind of read technical books and read the Wi-Fi, the CWNE books, and you can write all sorts of other stuff about AX and everything else. But I also like to do other things. So for me, that's what I've been kind of doing recently, the last 12 to 18 months.
Good. Next up, we'll start with Elaine this time. How long ago did you get your CWNE? Just last month?
CWNE 2 months now.
So he's our freshest minted one here. Does anyone in the room have a CWNE newer than 2 months? Oh, so yes, I got the right one. I was hoping somebody else didn't, and then I'm like, I got to ask the wrong person. So, as our newest CWNE, what's your advice for someone who wants to head down that path? Someone who's just new into the CWNE, SP, DP, AP track. What's your advice you would give someone who said, I'd like to be a CWNE, how do I do it?
Well, first of all, I think you need to be passionate about RF and everything it brings. For my own, I just read the book. I did not attend any boot camp, but that was my way of, I just wanted to go slowly. As we met originally, Keith, that goes back, if you remember, 2003 in New York.
About 15 years ago.
Yeah, in our air magnet courses. So it took me a long time, but just working and try to always be up to date. And that's one of the things I like about this field is that you always learn. So.
What I would recommend is just be self-motivated. I think I had one of the biggest motivation was that it was a requirement for my job. I needed to be an instructor and teach ECHA, and I needed to be a CWNE because I postponed it for so long. It took me like 4 years and like 3 CWNA classes before I was ready, because I was saying like, I'll take the exam when I'm ready. You're never going to be ready for any of these exams. Just schedule it and do it. In my region, in Latin America,
Now, I'm not trying to embarrass you, but did you ever fail a CBNP test?
Not yet. I probably overstudy. Mr. Parsons has the saying that if 70% is what's required to pass and you get like 90 something, then you studied too much. You wasted time studying, But
Hey, if 70.5, that means you're an efficient studier.
Yeah, so I probably overstudied. And that was my biggest constraint at the beginning, is that I wanted to do it perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect. In my region, Latin America, what I've noticed, and I've tried to mentor and motivate other fellow Spanish speakers to pursue the program and just get better professional development, is that they always have an excuse that the language, the books, the cost of the training, the cost of the exams. I think, yeah, that can be a restraint for many of us, but it is possible. Always try to find a way to have your company sponsor you or try to invest in yourself. I think not too long ago there was a discussion online saying like, oh, that's too expensive for me. And, Blake was interjecting that, you're investing in yourself. When you get certified, that certification, that knowledge goes with you, not with your company or whoever paid for it. So it's definitely worth making the effort and just pursuing it with passion. Just focus on it and make sure that you get the certifications and set some dates and do it and get a sponsor. If you don't have knowledge about certain things, just ask. Mr. Parsons mentioned the other day, look for another person, join Twitter and ask for help, and people will just pour and give you advice.
It's easy one for me. Join the WLA. It's true. We're doing all sorts of things, and we come up a minute ago and spoke about, bringing the community together, helping you out, having projects. And one of the things that we've talked about previously is having mentors within WLA help those guys who are new to the industry. So yeah, I mean, it's very, very simple. Join the WLAN Association, and then let us know that this is your goal and this is what you want to achieve. And then let us help you. Let us provide you with the resources and whoever you want to speak to. Let us just help you on your journey get there. So you're not on your own. You're not isolated or anything like that. That to me is all I can say, but I agree with everything that Fernie and this guy here with the name that I can't pronounce.
It's Elaine, right?
Elaine.
Yeah.
Alan. Call me Alan.
Yeah. Well, we can't because we've got another Alan down there. But yeah, you don't want to be associated with that. I guess from my standpoint, if I look at this, is that having been on the board for a past number of years and now retired from the board, the biggest one that people seem to have issues with is the application itself. And don't stress over the application, okay? The application process, so many people, they start the minute they finish their final exam from the professional series. Your application, to be honest, you should have started already previously while you're running through your test, because then everything starts to flow nicely. You have the publication requirement. If you started writing a blog, and I don't mean to have like a really well thought out blog, like those of you that read Lee Badman at Wired Not, his blogs sometimes have witty humor and banter in it and everything. This could be simply, instead of you taking notes on OneNote or in a notepad document, take your notes on a blog post. Because even if somebody comes up there and says, hey, your assumption of a duration field is wrong, now you have a chat back and forth that's happening through the comment sections where you're both learning and figuring out, well, am I wrong? Is it just a different interpretation of what's going on? And that blog post counts. Your blog posts are not also your essays. Your blog posts are just short, quick little jips about things that are going on. What's about voice? How do I look at 802.11 RKV packets to know if that's actually working? So don't get to the point where you finished all your exams and now you're starting your application. If that is your end goal of the CWNE, have the application in front of you before you start your exams and step through all those requirements so that you can be ready. I think when I was ready for the application, I left Robert Bart's CWAP class with Eddie. He and I were sitting in that class in December. I was sitting in Denver International Airport finishing up my essays. I had them emailed to Keith and Devin and Sam for review and ask them, hey, will you guys be my endorsers? And I already had all my information lined up for them to review. So then on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, I had my application in. I don't want to have to sit there and wait and write all these essays. And don't think you need to write us a novel. We don't want to read a novel. We want to read something short and sweet and to the point that shows to us that you can get the point across about that topic you're talking about with a clearly defined problem statement, how you resolved it, and maybe even how you used your knowledge from CWNP courses or the tests to find that solution and work through it. So work on the application while you're doing the exams so that you're not, like Fernie said, set a date to it. If you get to the point where all your tests are done and you have to start writing that application, the clock's ticking. You only have so much time until you have to retake another exam. So make sure you're not delaying it just because of the application.
Great, thank you. Having been on the board for about 200 of those, I can tell you it doesn't take very long in reading an essay to know whether or not you know what you're talking about. The presenters who all presented here, had any of them just taken 2 minutes of what they said and wrote it down, it would have counted. It was pretty obvious with our presenters that showed up. They knew what they were talking about. The interaction you said about the blog, Guillermo, how many messages did you go back and forth before you got to this point in your spreadsheet?
I've been told.
I'm guessing it's at least 100. You have a question, you ask, you get answers, you look up, you research, and you just rinse and repeat. I would like to, just from a conference standpoint, your 10 talks happen to count for those. If you wanted to submit that as your application, you can say, oh yeah, and here's my presentation. So it doesn't have to be a blog, it can be anything at all. Next question coming from the end. Alan, simple question, and I wouldn't have asked this because I ask it every year, and it's going to sound boring, but half of you are new, so you haven't heard the answers yet. Home lab, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay,
They
how
said
about
Alan,
a yes
Eddie.
and a why?
Yes and why? Because, so I'm a believer that the only way to learn, I'm a doer, so I've got to have the kit to be able to do it to learn. I can't read a book and absorb it like a sponge, like some people in here probably could, and I have to read it over and over again. But when I'm doing things, it kind of sticks. So when I'm able, so I have a Cisco lab at home, some 2504 controllers and whatnot, so I like to play, I like to dabble. It helps me kind of understand, what I'm doing effectively, so I think it's very, very important. I will say that it kind of gives you exposure to, the tools that we use and the devices and vendors that we work with. I'm not quite sure and convinced that it gives you the right level of experience, and what I mean by that is that you'll get experience from taking your lab exposure into the real world. That's what I mean by that. So I think it's very, very important that you have one. If you don't have one, get one.
Absolutely, yes, lab. And I know people always say like, well, I don't have money to buy an AP, I don't have money to buy a client, and yeah, that can be a justification, but we have got to find our ways and, I don't know, borrow or get in a group in your local area and perhaps, I don't know, buy a team type of lab and gather with other fellows in your areas and work on something, but it is important to know how things work. Getting a lab, it's extremely important, more than, just a simple discussion, because from reading a blog to capturing your own frames and analyzing your own frames and scratching your head like, I know he did it, he went through and he saw it, but how come I'm not seeing it? That gets you going, and the knowledge you get from struggling, I think that's the best we can get. So absolutely yes.
Of course, because practice can be different than theory. And for myself, I really like to play with the tools, and as a matter of fact, Wireless LAN PI, I think, is a great tool. And I'm starting to learn a little bit more about Linux and the commands, and so I'm getting into it. But what I find is when you have those tools is sometimes, when you go into a customer site, you have some tools that they don't have because they rely on controller. They think the controller and the AP is, they have all the, it's already on the console. So I should have all the information in there. Yes, but like Keith mentioned earlier, it's the point of view of the AP and the controller. Sometimes they miss the part of the client. So I think those tools, and I like to play with those tools, give you another view of their network.
I don't know. I'm just learning about all this DSS and this OFDM thingy from this awesome new packet analyzer here. I have this packet potato by Mr. Joel over there. This is my lab right now. It's awesome. Now, I used to always say, yes, you absolutely have to have a lab in your house. And I'm starting to kind of differ on that thought a little bit. And the reason why I say that is that we're getting so close towards not being able to afford anything in a home lab at any level anymore. You start to learn Cisco, the next revs of the CCIE are most likely going to have something from DNA Center on it. I don't even have a few customers that can afford the DNA Center, let alone one of us affording DNA Center. So I'm starting to see where we're going to have to kind of change that home lab model and starting to have to leverage some things like the Cisco D Cloud for applications that we can't do, or if you're lucky enough that your organization has a really nice lab in the office, I'm all for leveraging those. I think at the end of the day, lab when you can and how you can is really what it comes down to. The one thing I will caution folks against is rack rentals. And the reason why I caution against rack rentals, I'm always like, okay, great, I'm going to do this. I'm going to rent a rack lab. I did it for my ACMP earlier this year, and I was like, sweet, I got a week that I'm home, and I'm not supposed to travel anywhere. And lo and behold, it's the same week that my daughter's home from spring break, and I'm just like, crap. I gotta entertain her while I'm trying to do this lab work, and it's like she can only go with my wife so many days to work, so it's like I'm gonna lose some hours on that. You just tend to lose those hours pretty quickly. So I'd say is either have your own lab at home for what you can. It doesn't need to be the latest and greatest. Leverage what you can through work, or try to figure out, go to your SEs that you're working with through the different vendors and be like, hey, you guys got some loaner gear from like a demo depot or something I can borrow just to get some cycles on it? But we're fast approaching where we're just quite frankly not going to be able to afford it to be able to have a lab in our homes.
Thank you. I think, just to counter your last, I've seen your lab. We can't afford it. Yeah. I mean, he has full stacks of multiples. But that's how you learn. And I agree, though, some of the new features that need heavy cloud access, but even if you're a Meraki shop, get one Meraki AP and run Meraki little switch, and you can see the dashboard and go through all sorts of things. Just attend a webinar and you get one for free. Any questions for our esteemed panel at the front? No one? Okay, I have one last question then. What was your favorite session this week?
Oh, man. My favorite session. I think there's a couple of them. David Coleman starting off was certainly a great one, because this emerging technology is always interesting to hear about and see what's coming along there. And I actually learned a lot from Peter's on the Bluetooth side of things, because I think that's an area that we all struggle with, because I've had students in my ECSE courses, even just this year, that were there because they needed to design for 15.4 and they had no idea how they could. They're like, I don't even know if this tool can do it, but can we do anything with it? So we spent some time after class on a couple of nights trying to figure out, okay, could we pick this up in the spec N at least? How could we massage the files to try to make it like that signature and to make it look like something that we could do with it? So that one I got a lot of, because now I actually know of a hardware device I can go and buy and do some sniffing on it. So spend more money. Thanks, Peter.
I'm good. Same as you, I guess. Probably the first presentation from David. I don't know if it's because that 2.4 gigahertz is dead, but not dead anymore, I guess. But what I find is a lot of the time, especially in crowded city, 2.4 is very difficult. When you start a spectrum analyzer, duty cycle is up to the roof. 70% and more. And what I find is a lot of the time, the controller or client will select UNI 1 and UNI 3. And, we know that the client can do a lot more now. They can do all the frequency. But everything is on UNI 1 and UNI 3. So we should exploit that a little more, although the radar have the priority in UNI 2 and UNI 2 extended. But I think that presentation kind of opened my eyes on to look at that band to do a better design, probably.
I'll have to agree. That was the kind of like set a really high bar to start the conference with a lot of information. If I could not choose my favorite presentation by the favorite topic, I think AX has been very informative. But I'll probably go with Dennis' presentation on the after party, because we were there struggling. Francois had that great idea the day before about the presentation, like, let's do a lab, let's build it, like, oh yeah. And we kind of provided some WLAN PIs and a switch and kind of started getting ready. Have you practice? Like, no, we'll do it tomorrow. Like, no, there's no practice in such a big lab. So we stayed till they literally kicked us out of the room from there. And it was nice to see it documented and seeing Dennis's analysis of kind of like what we did and just his point of view. Like, say, I saw this, I have no idea what that is. That's kind of like a great approach, because that gets us going. So I like those two in one topic.
I didn't like any. I loved them all. to be honest with you. It was, I don't have a particular favorite. I think there are some standout ones, absolutely. German's time visualization was immense. Dave's was great, but I think everyone's, for me, from what I saw, were all fantastic. So I don't want to have any disrespectful comments and pick any personal favorites. I think I enjoyed the whole thing as a complete package personally, which is why I come here every year. So, you know, hats off to Keith and Fernie and Matthew for putting this on. But for me, not one particular favorite. Just enjoyed the whole thing. So.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'll add, like Wes's throughput one was pretty good, and all of them were good. But what I get out of this conference, I mean, I've been to most of them, and not always I can sit on every presentation because we're running around trying to set up equipment for others and help with whatever is necessary. But I think we have a pretty high bar for the Phoenix conference next year. You guys have done an amazing job this year.
Very good. Little round of applause for our CWNEs.
For you, my friend.